So peptides already exist in the body. Now, peptides loosely refer to a long chain of amino acids. Technically, growth hormone is a peptide. Okay, so that's the kind of loose umbrella term. But the peptides that are being used therapeutically are compounds that have been identified in the body that signal the body to perform certain things. So like there are peptides that tell the body to amplify its healing and recovery process. There are peptides that tell your body to release more growth hormone. There are peptides that tell the body to tan its skin. There's all kinds of different peptides. Peptides that tell the body to improve its glucose utilization, uptake more glucose, produce more energy. Now, what makes peptides unique is they're not drugs. So we're not forcing the body to have effects. We're using its already present signaling system, which means that what's also already present in the body are checks and balances. So I could take a growth hormone releasing peptide and it'll tell my body to release more growth hormone, but I will not release more growth hormone than my body would release naturally in optimum, I should say, ways, right? So I may get my body to release growth hormone levels that would match what I did in my 20s, but I'm not going to go above that. I'm not going to be able to get my body to release so much growth hormone that it's like I'm taking bodybuilder doses of growth hormones. So that's what makes them quite unique. Peptides are largely unpatented or unpatentable because of their structure. Now, I think that pharmaceutical companies are trying to find ways to lobby the FDA to be able to regulate because there's so much money that could potentially be made here if they could patent them. But for now, you could find peptide. You could go through a compound pharmacy. The compound pharmacy produces the peptide, and you get them for like really low prices. So the margins aren't huge. This is why pharmaceutical companies aren't jumping all over them. But the ones that they can patent, they are jumping on. For example, GLP-1 agonists like semaglutide, also known as the trade name Ozempic, right? This is like the big fat loss drug that is like just exploding because people are seeing that they're losing weight on it. It suppresses their appetite. It's got great beneficial effects on the brain and all this other stuff. But you could also buy semaglutide, the generic version of Ozempic, go through a compound pharmacy and a doctor and get it for far less than what you would do when you go through the patented brand name of it. But yeah, that's the world of peptides. I've only really dived in deep the last year with this. We did a great podcast with one of the lead doctors and researchers in that space, Dr. Seeds. So for anybody who wants to learn more, I would suggest checking out that episode. Pretty remarkable. My experience with peptides has been pretty amazing. MOTC is a peptide that I use that had some profound effects, crazy energy effects, had some fat loss effects, mood boosting effects. BPC 157, probably the most recommended peptide for the body. Great for brain health, great for healing, injuries, recovery. I love how that is making me feel. My gut health has had profound effects, positive effects from BPC 157. But there's, I think, like 1,000 peptides. So this is kind of an emerging, I should say, space in terms of the mainstream. But peptide science and peptides themselves have been experimented with and used for decades now.
You just mentioned the decade factor, but 5, 10 years ago, was this something that you found people in your circle were experimenting with and talking about? To me, it seems just so new that at least in the mainstream, it's catching wind.
It was fringe in my space in the sense that you saw biohackers using and talking about them. But like the Soviets, they were using peptides for a long time and using them as medicines for a long time. You saw some experiments here in the U.S. But again, because you can't patent them under current, I guess, regulations, pharmaceutical companies have very little interest in pursuing them and the studies around them. But they are quite remarkable. I think, I would like to see more funding go the way of peptides so that we could start to see some, like, lots of human studies. But I mean, like I said, they're they're pretty remarkable in their potential and their ability. And again, I'll defer to, because this is not my expertise, I'll defer to the experts on this. But like I said, I talked to Dr. Seeds, who's like, he's been researching these for a while, and he's like one of the leading world's authorities on this. And based off of what he's saying, it's like, this is pretty cool stuff. They don't have the side effects that drugs do, because you don't get this like receptor downregulation and all these other side effects, because you had to kind of shoehorn in a compound to affect particular receptors. You're giving your body what it already uses to signal these functions. So it has its own natural checks and balances, which inherently makes them a lot safer to use.
You mentioned Ozempic. Is that actually a peptide? It sounds like it might be a little bit gray if it's actually under that umbrella. It is obviously a drug, but is it considered a peptide as well?
It's a peptide, 100%. GLP-1 agonist. Yeah, it's 100% a peptide.
And how do you feel about that? That one's definitely caught a lot of mainstream media attention, and
It works. My belief around things like that, because you'll take Ozempic and you'll lose weight, right? You'll lose, the data would show 10 to 20% of body weight without doing anything else, just taking that. It does suppress your appetite. It's probably definitely one of the main ways it works. It also seems to rewire behaviors around, or should I say compulsive behaviors. So people will report that they don't want to smoke as much or drink as much, or bite their nails or stuff like that. But here's the problem. If you just eat less and you don't strength train and you don't monitor protein intake, then a significant portion of your weight loss will come from muscle. And you're not dealing with the root cause as to why you overeat, why you're inactive. So it's not by itself a great solution, but I do see it as a good bridge. The same way I would see antidepressant and anxiolytic use among people with, let's say, low levels of chronic depression, where they could use an antidepressant to kind of bridge between where they're at now to the behaviors that lead to better mental health, like activity, sunlight, better relationships. So I could see GLP-1 agonists being used as a way to, like, somebody who's really struggled, just has these impulsive eating behaviors, to use them in conjunction with exercise, diet, strength training, and then slowly build up those disciplines and behaviors, and then come off the peptide type of deal.
if you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
The default is going to be, you're going to be obese, you're probably going to develop diabetes, and you're not going to feel very good. And that's just the way it is, and you have to step outside of that in order to change things. Muscle is so protective, in fact, that is